What happens in the sky affects life down here on Earth. The celestial compass shows you how and guides your way with astrology you can use from professional astrologer Kathy Beal. Every episode features her light-hearted, practical forecasts and navigational tips, blended with humor, optimism, and a love of patterns, symbolism, and pop culture references. Kathy translates technicalities into concepts that apply to real life. You'll learn how the current moment ties to where we've been, from the recent past to cycles that last happened years ago, and get a look at where we're heading. And much more, from special topics to special guests. The Celestial Compass, enlightening, entertaining, and empowering. Here's your host, Kathy Beal.
Greetings, Earthlings. I'm Kathy Beal of EmpowermentUnlimited.net, and today we're going to have a completely astrology-focused episode for quite a change. My guest is Dabney Lawless, an evolutionary astrologer who trained with author and astrologer Steven Forrest for more than 20 years, obtaining his master level apprenticeship certification. She provides tools and inspiration using the cosmos to help people find meaning and generally appreciate the gifts that they have brought into this life. And she's the current host of, I'm trying to read, the Organization of Professional Astrologers Mercury Hour on the last Sunday of the month. Welcome, Dabney.
Hi, thank you. I have not heard that read out loud, and so it sounds so professional. And so, thank you for reading it back to me.
You are welcome. That's nice. It's nice to hear that, isn't it? I always like to start with the origin story. How did you come to astrology?
So, I loved astrology from early on, even when I was very little. Do you remember those star scrolls that you used to
Everybody
get?
mentions them. Yes.
Right. So when I was, in the sixth grade, I used to save up my allowance and buy those, but I didn't really think that I would ever be an astrologer. That wasn't on my radar. And then I went through a really horrible Pluto and Saturn transit and had a very terrible breakup, which is often when, younger people come to astrologers, especially. And I went to an astrologer and she was terrible. She didn't even know that I was coming. She forgot. She was just so scattered. And I was like, I could do a better job. So I left her, and this is back when, there wasn't, you had to go see an astrologer. It wasn't
Right.
like you could pop up on Zoom. And so I went straight to the bookstore and I bought a book about learning astrology. And it was just very synchronistic because the book was The Inner Sky by Steven Forrest. And in the back, it said, if you would like to join my apprenticeship program, email here, or here's the address to write us. And I did, and I joined his apprenticeship program, and the rest is history.
Now, a couple of things here. For those who are younger who don't remember, star scrolls were tiny scrolls that were often at the cash register in stores, right? They were this little thing, and you'd unscroll it and it would have a forecast for your sign.
Yeah, I mean, I would love to get my hands on one now to see, because I could actually read it and understand it. But it was like up by the candy or like the magazine, so it was always an impulse purchase, and they would have one for the month for whatever your particular sign was. And I'm a Cancer, and my best friend at the time was an Aquarius, and so we would each buy them and then pull it out, and then every day it would give you your horoscope, and like it would have like this bar graph of like what was going to happen, and so they were super cool. I would like to get them again.
And I also relate to your first astrologer experience, because the first person I went to, it was a disaster and told me all kinds of cataclysmic stuff. And I had to wait for a long, long time because she was so disorganized. And then the second one this was in the days when you either wrote the chart out by hand and did the calculation, or
Right.
you went to a bookstore, and the bookstore that had the program would run the program. Well, this woman had given the birth information wrong, and I kept telling her that what she was calling my ascension, very pretentious, wasn't right, and when it finally got through to her that she had the wrong time, she blamed the bookstore and wouldn't give me a credit for all the time she had spent with the wrong interpretation of my chart. So my reaction was, "This is what not to do." Your reaction was, "I will learn this." I
Yes.
was already learning it at this point, so that's an interesting commonality here of,
Yeah.
a cautionary tale, do not do this. So, did you travel periodically to meet with Steven Forrest? How did that apprenticeship program work?
Yeah, so he has his own big school now called the Forrest Center for Evolutionary Astrology. But back then, he had two apprenticeship programs. He may have had three actually, one in North Carolina, one in Southern California, and one in Napa. And I lived in at Austin, Texas at the time. So I would fly to Napa twice a year and take, a 5-day workshop or 4-day workshop with him. But really, I was before my first Saturn return. So I was under 30, and they had a program because I had no money back then. It was kind of driving the beater car and like just trying to get by. And they had a program where you could get a discount on lodging and the program fees if you helped transcribe all of his stuff. So they they would send me this transcription, um, which the machine, which again, a very old school thing, like all this stuff's automated now. But back then, it was such an education for me of learning astrology because I had to transcribe all his talks. And so
Wow.
for like hours, and I had just broken up with my boyfriend. I had nothing to do. I was depressed. So it was kind of like just throwing myself into this thing that just kind of took over my life and became magical. So I got this really intense boot camp just by transcribing his talks.
That is amazing. I could see how that would really get it into your entire being.
Yeah, it was
And
very Saturnian, right? It
uh,
was very Saturnian where it was like, okay, so you have to do all of this hard work, but at the end, you're going to have just a wealth of knowledge that maybe other people wouldn't have the benefit of having because they didn't, slow down and have to do all this intense work.
and did evolutionary astrology resonate with you from the start? Because it's different than what's in the star scrolls.
Yeah, 100%. It was kind of like, when he did the reading for me, it all clicked, like, "Oh, that's
Mm,
why this pattern has shown up time and time again in my life." And it just sort of gave me a roadmap for the very first time where, I'm a Virgo moon. I am all about like, tell me what to do and I'll do it. And so it was like, okay, here's the roadmap. And I just began to implement it. And now my life didn't like suddenly turn around and get easier overnight, but there was this path to consciousness that I knew that if I kept on this path, my life would improve. And it did. And
mhm.
so I began doing readings about, and I didn't study with anyone else. I was very just Stephen Forrest, to the point where I had a few other books by other astrologers, like some Liz Green and some Howard Sesbortis and things like that. But really, I just knew the Stephen Forrest way. I began doing readings about 4 years, 3 or 4 years after I learned astrology. And then I really began writing horoscopes. And so that was a different part of my brain. So I wrote for major magazines and I launched a business called Astro Cutie, which was for moms and children. And that was kind of my specialty in my early 30s. Now, I wasn't even a mom yet. I think it had something to do with my biological clock, in all honesty. But so I started to make a name for myself through that. And I was the astrologer for Parents magazine.
Oh, I didn't know this.
Yeah, and then pregnancy and newborn, and I started writing a bunch, and I was really kind of on my way, and then I got asked to write a ton of content. So again, here we go again, this very Saturnian. I wrote a ton of content for what would now be an app, but they didn't have apps back then. It was in the early 2000s where that sort of thing was just starting. So it was a program that they were doing for their website where you could put in your birth date and your child's birth date, and then it had like horoscopes for everything. So I wrote an insane amount of content, got paid little money, but they were supposed to kind of really promote me. They launched it. And like 2 months later, they had a new editor who didn't like astrology. And so she cut it. And so it just really never saw the light of day. And so and then shortly after that, I met my husband and had a son, and I just kind of put my astrology on a shelf for a few years.
My goodness. All right. Well, then what and you're currently balancing it with other work. You're one of the people who does something else as well.
Yeah. So
And
I have a PR career, but as that PR career is coming, I'm working toward wrapping it up, and my son will be going to high school next year. So there's kind of this like, I sort of realized that I needed to get back to my true love and passion. And so about a year ago, I launched a YouTube channel. And so I sort of kind of came back on the scene, like, since, I'd been gone since like 2006 and 2007. And then I said, and I was never fully gone. I still, read books and did readings for friends and things like that. But I wasn't, really focused on being a professional astrologer again until about a year ago.
well, you have made up a lot of lost time, and YouTube is where we met each other. That's where things, yeah, that started. So you're seeing clients again now, somewhat. Yeah.
Yep. Yep.
Okay.
And I've been very blessed. YouTube, it's sort of interesting because I guess I hung up my banner more like, I think I put it on a shelf maybe around 2007, 2008, actually, not 2006. And that was right around the time that Facebook and social media started coming into play. So I think I was just a little early. I think had I had the momentum of social media much earlier, but basically my life took a different direction right at the time social media was coming into play. So I kind of got the benefit of like saying like, oh, I'm going to just jump back in with YouTube.
So could you explain to people what your approach to evolutionary astrology is, or what you see it as, and how it's different than what, if you go onto Instagram or TikTok, the stuff you see there?
100%. So evolutionary astrology really does look at your evolution. It looks at what is the best possible life for you, knowing that we each have our own individual best possible life. And so we look very heavily at the north and south nodes of the moon. And so that's really a primary piece of evolutionary astrology. We take Pluto very seriously as well in the birth chart. But when I look at the nodes, I'm very much of the Steven Forrest school. And so we look at the rulership of the nodes. We look at what houses the rulership is in, what aspects they make to different planetary energies. And we can kind of formulate, if you believe in past lives, we can formulate a story that would represent where you are coming from, your evolution, the lessons that you may need to learn from in either past lives or ancestral DNA, just your ancestry. And then we look at where you're going in this lifetime. Excuse me, what is the soul's purpose? So it very much is kind of this very big picture that everything comes back to, well, what are you here to do in this lifetime? What is your unique gift? And all of the different planets play into your unique gifts to help get you to that destiny.
I don't even know where to take this. This is because this is so much bigger and more useful actually in the long run than my little pet peeve of the trivialization or the Hallmark Channel version of astrology. It's making it popular, and in that sense, it's good. So I guess what we see on Instagram and TikTok is the current day version of those little star squirrels, but still.
Yeah, I mean, also the stuff I wrote for like Parents Magazine was very, pop astrology. And so, if you go to my website and look at my old writings, like they're all very pop astrology and, what's a good day for your wedding and, like how to decorate the nursery by sign and, and all that stuff's fun and cute, but that isn't the richness of what I like to do. And that's why I don't do so many readings for children anymore, because as I've matured and, I'm a 50-year-old woman, I'd much rather sit with someone and really kind of validate the experiences they've had in their life, help them
Mhm.
understand why certain things may have transpired the way they did, but then also help give them kind of a light at the end of the tunnel to sort of say like, oh, okay, I can do things differently. Things can take a different form. I don't have to be in this sort of automatic repeating of patterns. And that's just a really beautiful thing.
Do you ever have clients who work with you in tandem with being in therapy? Because it sounds like this approach could be really rich.
Yeah, of course, absolutely. And also, I consider myself pretty intuitive. So, uh, I've since coming back into astrology the past couple years, I have taken classes and really tried to kind of get myself back up to speed. Like, what did I miss, kind of thing. And so I did like a lot of classes with predictive astrologers, because really evolutionary astrology is not predictive in any way, shape, or form. And what I found is, as much as I've learned a lot of these new tools, it's not where my heart is. And I find that I'm doing my readings the way that I've always done them, which is just this very deep, soulful reading where we connect and we talk about what was your childhood patterns? Like what happened in your childhood? What happened, around your Saturn return? Like what were the big life decisions? And we kind of unpack them together a little bit in a life coaching way, pulling in the astrology to help give that guidance.
But you do predictive work also, I have seen
A little
somewhat
bit,
on you.
I have, but, I definitely I've always been very politically active and very opinionated and, I own who I am. So, I do take some of that and I try to, give guidance about where things are going and what energies we're working with. I think that is, for me, what I've come to realize is there are these planetary energies, and there is the highest expression of those planetary energies, and there's a lower expression of them. And ultimately, we can't control what other people do. We can only control what we do. And so, in the predictive realm, I would say, if I'm working with a client and I know their patterns,
Mhm.
there is a way of saying like, this is an opportunity for you to get out of your comfort zone because you could meet somebody. That is probably as predictive as I want to say when it comes to like, will I meet somebody like the man of my dreams next week? It's like, yeah, that's available to you, but you have to make that choice. I do also believe in some degree of free will. And I think the more unconscious you are, the more you're pulled to and fro by the planetary energies without even knowing why.
That would make sense. I've
Yes.
certainly
Do you
seen
do
that
you
myself
find that
too.
as well?
Yeah, I've seen that as well, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you can see a trajectory based on patterns and past conduct, and if you continue, here's your pattern, here's where you're heading, here's what the influences are, you're gonna go right into that. Is that what you want?
Right. And
Okay,
so,
my
I think when you come to mundane astrology, which I know you and I both very much like, which is kind of looking at like what's going on in the world, what's going on in the political stage, I think then you kind of, the more I'm doing it, the more I'm realizing that there's so many people who are acting from that very unconscious place that unfortunately we often see the lower expression because people are not aware of what the higher expression is, because you have to look at this sort of collective influencing the world.
Yep.
So we're in a mess.
Yeah, this is another topic. We will just put this one aside. But I am curious, like, what are you thinking about now? What do you find yourself, your astrological mind heading toward? Are there specific signatures floating around out there or topics or anything?
Yeah. So what I've come to realize is, especially given my story, there was this sort of sense over the past decade, like everyone became an astrologer. Astrology became so much more complicated in some ways. And there were so many different schools almost like competing with each other, like just interesting dynamics that I wasn't exposed to. So I think that in some ways there was like a benefit to being on the just being a hobbyist for several years, for a while, and entering back in and seeing how the career it's changed. I realize how much people speak in this what I call astro babble. They just start using these really big astrology words, and most people who want readings or want to learn astrology, it's just way over their head. And in some ways, I think some people can't get out of that pattern because they're just have that brain. And so, no judgment. That's how they're very, it's almost like a mathematician, right? It's like, this is how you do it. And then there's also people, I think, who it's like they want to impress other astrologers, or, like there's kind of this, thing where I realized that people like me and my channel grew so fast because I talk in very relatable language. And so that was the feedback I kept giving, was like, oh my God, I finally understand. Thank you for making, like, I watch, insert astrologer here. And at the end of it, I don't really know what I was supposed to take away. Whereas like, I tell a story, or like I give a metaphor, or I bring in some mythology, but I kind of don't talk as much about the details of the astrology, even though it's based on astrology. And so what I'm doing now, I'm teaching courses, but I'm teaching beginner courses because I think that that's who my people are, is they are people that maybe want to read their own chart, but don't want to be astrologers, right? Like they want to learn what the other astrologers are talking about, but it's really just for their own self-awareness and their own self-growth. And so that's what I'm focused on, is helping to empower people to be conscious and know who they are and how to work with the planetary energy.
It makes sense that somebody whose other business is PR, aka communication, would take this approach. I mean, it's something I do. I really endeavor to translate it. In fact, on Astrology Day, I gave a talk about translating, like the importance of speaking to your audience in the audience's language, because they're not going to get it otherwise.
Yeah. I think there's just so much we have to learn. And so and it's not about dumbing it down. It's just about actually, talking in English. Like you said, in my other career, I've worked with engineers that talk about technology, and I have to translate that to a consumer. And I think it's a similar sort of thing. And it's not necessarily a skill that all astrologers, brilliant astrologers, but like they may not have that ability to translate it.
There are times someone will send something to me and will be using incredibly arcane, minor aspects and expect me to remember all of them, and my eyes just glaze over, and I've been doing this for decades, like, no. So if I do this, yeah, what about
Yeah.
the
And my
people?
teacher always kept it simple. He used the Ptolemaic aspects. I know that quincunxes have very much come into fashion right now. And so I'll play a little bit with quincunxes, but for the most part, I use the trine, the square, the opposition, and the conjunction. Because even with that, it can be overwhelming.
Yeah, you can get a lot of information with that.
Right.
Yep,
Yeah.
absolutely.
And the other thing that I also tell people is like, you're going to find the right astrologer for you. Even though I had a terrible experience, it was the right astrologer for me because it led me to what was next. And that's, kind of
Mhm.
a little bit of your story as well, where it was like, oh, I don't want to do it this way. Like, you're always going to get the information you need from the right astrologer, and go to one that you're drawn to. That is the most important thing that I think you can do is, I'm not going to be right for everybody.
Mhm.
That's it. Like, I'm got 4 planets in Cancer, a Virgo moon, Sag rising. Like, that's me, right? You are very Aquarian, right? And so the people who might be drawn to your energy may not be drawn to my energy, but they respect both of us, right? But
Mhm.
they're going to
Yep,
get different information from you than from me.
and before we get to the break, one thing, have you noticed I have noticed that my new clients have really uncanny links with my chart. Really uncanny links, particularly with the moon. Is that something you've experienced?
Yeah, no,
Like
I definitely do pull them up sometimes and I'm like, "Oh, wow," or there's definitely like a planetary energy that repeats often.
mhm, and that's why they understand, like, "Oh, I can listen to this person because something in me is responding to it,"
Right.
the way I see it.
Yep.
Okay, we're gonna take a brief break now. Hang on, everybody. We'll be back in a couple of minutes.
Om Times TV.
Want help with your own celestial compass? Visit my site, empowermentunlimited.net, for Astro Insight forecasts for each week, month, and new and full moon. Want to explore the personal impact? Make a decision? Understand another person? It is possible. Click the Services tab to book a personal session with me. That address again? empowermentunlimited.net.
Imagine becoming a super influencer. Reinvent yourself, invest in your brand, and then manifest your success with a robust spheric approach. Om Times Media and Broadcasting offers a unique and multifaceted way to become the spiritual and conscious influencer you deserve to be by putting your message across our powerful platform with its proven record of integrity and excellence. Through our produced shows, Om Times offers the opportunity to become a social media TV personality, a radio show host, an Om Times magazine columnist, and a syndicated podcaster, all in one shot. By live streaming your show on Om Times TV and broadcasting it across the extensive Om Times radio and TV networks, you become more than a host. You become an ambassador and a force for positive change. Om Times. Open yourself to the possibilities.
If I could be you, and you could be me for just 1 hour. If we could find a way to get inside each other's minds. Walk a mile in my shoes. Walk a mile in my shoes. Well, before you abuse, criticize, and accuse. Walk a mile in my shoes.
Welcome back to Celestial Compass. We're talking with evolutionary astrologer Dabney Lawless. I'm wondering, are there particular current aspects for this year that you find yourself coming back to more, again and again, or is there anything you're seeing with the nodes or anything at all?
Yeah.
Just throw it
Well,
out completely.
obviously, this is like the biggest year of change pretty much in all of our lives astrologically. I think, 2020 was a big year, but this is for change. That's just the theme of this year is, what's new, what's old is no longer with us any longer, but we're not quite in what's coming. And so it's this transitionary period that's very unsettling for
Yes.
everybody. Uh, humans don't like change. I don't like change, like you get to a place, you feel safe, you want things to stay the same. And basically the cosmos and the universe is saying, well, sorry, that's not what's happening right now. And so I do a lot with the outer planets, obviously, in mundane astrology, and looking at, and by mundane astrology, meaning like what's happening in the world around us, and then how on a personal level that we can keep our sanity with everything happening. So I did do a lot last year on Pluto moving into Aquarius, and it was very much about that. But Pluto will be in Aquarius for over 20 years. So I think that the thing on everyone's radar right now is this Neptune just went into Aries. And I can talk about a little bit what that means. And then Saturn just moved into Aries last week. And those two are going to be traveling together. And then they're going to be sitting right next to each other in early 2026. And what does that mean for everybody? So that's really up. And then, also looking to this summer when Uranus moves into Gemini and Jupiter moves into Cancer.
It's all unprecedented, actually, for our lives, and in many ways, completely, because all of the outer planets are moving from the very end of the signs they've been hanging out in for a number of years, creating mud in earth and water, and now they're hanging out at the beginning of fire and air. So firestorms. I have to admit, it's creating a grand trine in my chart. And both times, like when Neptune moved, and then this weekend when Saturn moved, I did not sufficiently hydrate. And it is hysterical how bodily tangible these impacts could be, because I got so dehydrated that I have been scorched earth for days. Go figure. You'd think, oh, a grand trine in fire, I shall be highly energized. No, I was an idiot is what it was.
Yeah, those grand trines, you can just
body.
sort of sleep through them, ignore them, not think about it, and then they come back and smack you in the face a little bit.
Burn you up. Burn you up. So this is something, I mean, everybody's talking about it. Everybody's got presentations. I've seen things on your channel. I'm giving a talk on it. Everyone has a talk. So just random thoughts. What's going through your head about all this?
Yeah. Okay. So the most recent one that just happened is Saturn this past weekend moved into Aries on May 24th. And that is just dramatically different energy. And so I'm kind of calling it like there's a new sheriff in town.
Ah, that's a good way.
And so the Saturn function is about accountability. It's about structures. It's about hard work. It's about time. It's about limitations. It's about patience. Aries is about moving forward and dashing ahead and showing that I'm here and, declaring that, you've got the world by the tail. And so these two energies together, it's Saturn is typically what's called in its fall in Aries, meaning it doesn't like to be in Aries. But I personally, my own just intuitive thing is I feel like Saturn's going to prefer being in Aries than in Pisces, because Saturn has, and that's where it's been the past 2.5 years. Saturn is about structures and Pisces is about no boundaries. And so I think we've all felt that. I think we've all felt a confusion. I think we've all felt a push-pull. I think we've all felt that we can't, it's like looking through our glasses and everything looks fuzzy. Like we can't really get our fingers on like what's happening. I think that there's a lot of energy clearing at this point with Saturn moving into Aries. I think there's going to be a balance of like wanting to push forward, wanting to make changes, but there's going to be potentially something saying like, okay, slow down. We have to do this the right way. And so I think that the energy, again, there's a high road and a low road. So let's look at the high road first. The high road is that there's new leadership emerging. In our own personal lives, we become new leaders. Like we become more ambitious. We see things clearer. We have all these opportunities to embody who we are and to really be a little bit more self-centered in a positive way, because especially people who have a tendency to, overgive, we can kind of have better boundaries at this time.
Mhm.
I think we can get a lot done. I do think there will be new leaders that are coming. I think we'll see things clearer. I think there's going to be potentially accountability for bad behavior. I think that when Saturn was in Aries last time was the Bill Clinton, Monica Lewinsky scandal. That was kind of
Mhm.
the biggest news in the US. So there's a lot of things that sort of say, Saturn is the Lord of karma. And, if you've been acting in integrity, there's Saturn will reward you. If you've not been acting in integrity, then Saturn will kind of come back to bite you. And in the sign of Aries, that's where I sort of say there's a new sheriff in town, because before, if the sheriff is sort of spacey and like losing the keys to the jail all the time, which is a little bit Pisces, there's no accountability. But Aries is, not going to let things slide. So I think in that way, we can take heart that there might be more cause and action that makes sense. But there's also more rebellion. And there's also more people kind of wanting things their own way, and potentially a little bit more authoritarian type empowerment, because Saturn is structure and authority, and Aries can be very violent and harsh. And so there's kind of this authoritarian versus the rebel energy. So that's kind of on a mundane level. But in our own personal lives, I think it's about cleaning up messes. Have you not paid down your debt? Or it's sort of like personal responsibility suddenly is going to be a little bit more in fashion and a little bit easier to grasp and necessary, potentially more austerity in some ways, but then that teaches you how to do more with less. So those are some of the themes with Saturn and Aries that I'm looking at. I don't know. What do you think about that, Kathy?
Those are all really good descriptions of it. I've been making jokes about, new big kid pants. It's time for new big kid pants, wearing them differently. And I'm also finding it fascinating that Neptune went first and Saturn's coming up behind. So we've had a couple of months of a new relationship to inspiration or to transcendence or our own link to guidance that's not earthly, maybe even just creativity. And some spiritual warrior figures came to the fore pretty immediately
Mhm.
when Neptune did that. But on our personal life, I've been telling people, and I'm hoping I am right about this, that Saturn now moving into that is a finding out how we naturally know how to do something. Like where we know how to ride the bike. We've been riding the bike and now we master it. Or we've been, just something going on now where we claim dominion over this new relationship to guidance or spirit or something that is not completely earthbound. And Saturn brings the not completely earthbound down into the earth plane somehow. So it could be a really strong, these are your beliefs, okay, how are you going to implement them? And
And it can be very entrepreneurial. I think if
mm,
you know enough anything about astrology and you look and see where the early degrees of Aries are in your chart, that'll give you some clues about the domain for you that things are going to
mhm,
be working on. So like, for example, if it's in your fourth house, there may be more responsibility that you have to take within the family. So anytime Saturn hits one of your houses, what that house represents will be kind of lit up in a way that you have to take responsibility. But I think in the sign of Aries, it's going to be, how do I take responsibility? Because Aries is the me, it's the I am. And so it's how do I take responsibility in a way that I'm getting my own needs met as well. It's not just about obligations to others, it's about also, obligation to yourself. And so let's say you have Saturn and Aries in the 10th house, and you've been working a 10th house having to do with career and mission in the world, and you've been working a job for 20 years that you despise, it might be time to finally break out and be an entrepreneur. There might be something about you putting in the hard work to start your own business, and you'll finally have like the clarity to know what you want to start your business in, or you'll finally have the clarity or the ambition and the get up and go to kind of to make your dreams and what you want a reality.
And once Uranus moves into Gemini in July, and then again next spring, having this little dance with them all, there could be like a switch going down and immediately saying goodbye to something. Like if you've been sitting on the fence and then bam, suddenly you're over it and you're out the door. There could be an epidemic of that going on, which
Yeah. Usually when Uranus enters a new sign, there is some sort of dramatic announcement that it's here, right? And historically, Uranus and Gemini has been huge inventions that have changed society because it's new ways of thinking, it's new ideas. And what's somewhat exciting to me is Gemini is also youth. And I think the youth of our country has been struggling for some time. And so there might be a revitalization and a re-empowerment around youth movements. I also think that, we've had this very dystopian view. For nightmares are the domain of Pisces, okay, on the shadow. So Pisces has all these beautiful connotations, but one of them on the shadow or the low road is nightmares. And think about how much dystopian media we have been ingesting, from zombie apocalypses to climate change apocalypse to to pandemic apocalypse. Like it has seemed for the past decade just never ending apocalypse. And technology now it seems to be bringing and heralding this new kind of apocalyptic thinking. And this is something you were asking, what are you thinking about? I've been learning a lot about these new tech leaders who really have gone down a rabbit hole and have become almost in their own ways like cult-like. And very dystopian. And rather than kind of building up society and really kind of trying to improve things down here in Earth, they're like, let's jettison ourselves to Mars, or let's replace humans with robots. And so there's kind of this very like, well, if the world's going to fall apart anyway, at least I'm going to be controlling and I know best. Which to me has this very like that's sort of that rabbit hole of that Piscean energy. And I feel like it's not going to really go that way, because if you look throughout history, there have been lots of death cults. There have been lots of dystopian prophecies, and they've not come true yet. And so I think that Uranus and Gemini is going to herald some hope. And my hope, I think it will bring new technologies that will change society, but I'm hopeful that happening at the same time as Saturn enters Aries, that there is a little bit of a like pulling back on the reins and saying like, how do we do this where the human is actually empowered versus replaced? How do we step out of the nightmare and into, and also out of the fantasy of utopia, because that's the flip side of it. And how do we look at this as actually being like a utilitarian progress that is actually something that people benefit from versus are fearful of?
And I'm having two lines of thought flesh themselves out in my brain simultaneously, which is fascinating. It seems to me that a lot of what you're saying is a kind of sideways expression of what the nodes are doing right now.
Right. Yeah. So the north node up in the sky, so this wouldn't be, your personal north and south node, which is unique to you and the people that were born around the time you were born. What they're doing up in the sky right now is the north node is in Pisces and the south node is in Virgo. The north node in Pisces collectively right now is asking us to embody the higher expression of that Pisces, which is empathy, which is caring about people, right? It's like, how do we take care of those less fortunate? How do we provide for those in need? That's all very Piscean. Virgo is wanting to control things. Virgo and that's where the south node is collectively. And that's what we're moving away from. So when we talk about the south node, we look at the shadow. When we look at the north node, we look at the higher expression. And so there's no judgment on Virgos or Pisces in this. Just know what I'm talking about is collective energy. And I personally have both Virgo and Pisces in my chart. And so do you, whoever you are listening. So Virgo in its shadow is perfectionist, it's idealist, but it's also very critical. It's very controlling. And it kind of does have a complex of like, I know better. Like I can fix this. This is my, wanting things their way because they want to make sure that they control the outcome. And the humanity, the feelings piece of it sometimes gets lost at the wayside. And so what we're being asked this year is not to let the feelings and the compassion and the empathy and those who have less than us suffer for the sake of control or perfection that just is not achievable.
And there could be some we're all in this together watershed moments that could float through our lives.
Yeah, I mean, you were talking about, the dehydration, right? And so with all of these astrologers everywhere are kind of, and you don't have to be a predictive astrologer to know that there are these major climate change events taking place. And so, giant tornadoes, all of a sudden Neptune goes into Aries and like we're having all these like tornadoes and they're predicting very big hurricane season and we had the big wildfires in Los Angeles. So climate change events are accelerating and there is nothing more of an equalizer than when things, hit the fan and you have to come together in a survivalist sort of moment. And I would definitely say that Saturn in Aries feels also like a little survivalist as well. Like take responsibility and build a better way.
And the other line of thinking that was simultaneously going through my head has to do with an injection of the human part of it. And isn't that part of the potential of Jupiter moving into Cancer in June?
Yeah. So see, there's all these, like the stew is so rich right now. And so Jupiter moving into Cancer, I think offers some humanity. I think it offers a sense of like, don't forget to nurture your loved ones. Don't forget that you can forgive people that you feel have wronged you. I do think that Jupiter in Cancer is a tremendous opportunity for forgiveness. It offers a great opportunity for time with family and recognizing what's truly important above all else. Also, it's the earth in some ways. Like it's the moon. It's ruled by the moon. It's kind of it's the feeling realm, but it is also like mother, and we think of Mother Earth. And so I do think there is something about recognizing the formidableness of nature. And historically, I did write an article about this, that Jupiter in Cancer has coincided with times of extreme nationalism. So that is a shadow potentially that we have to watch out for. it also was like around the time of the McCarthyism.
Mhm.
So there is this sense of, you have to be careful of being a little tribal during this time. But I also think it's just got this beautiful opportunity for healing, getting in touch with your emotions, prioritizing family, and just kind of coming back together, and getting out of that sort of dystopian robot worry.
Right, and when, Hollywood and movies, which tend to presage what's floating around in outer reality, so there have been these massively popular, uh, franchises with pretty scary. I mean, Mad Max was way long ago, but The Hunger Games, Handmaid's Tale, which I will not watch. Will not watch. I read it, that was all I needed.
Yeah.
Uh but it seems to me that there could be more, I don't know, family-oriented, sweet, I don't know, we'll see what kind of romantic comedies come out this summer.
Well, it's going to be interesting because Cancer is a cardinal sign and Aries is a cardinal sign. So I think it's about getting things done. I mean, and we've been in sort of this, fixed and mutable stew. Like, I just think with Neptune moving into Aries, there is going to be potentially a glamorization of war on some level. But I also think that there is going to be a reaction to that with Saturn in Aries, where it's like the polarity of the importance of peace.
Mhm.
And we've already been seeing kind of the, a toxic masculinity, or however you want to call it, sort of run rampant. I think that there's now kind of more of an accountability spotlight on that with this Aries. And so
Mm.
I do think that Neptune and Aries, like we may see, people actually successfully addressing homelessness, successfully
Mhm.
addressing drug addiction. Some of the things that really just got out of control during Neptune and Pisces, because it felt like there was no solution. It wasn't action oriented. It was a little bit too compassionate, go with the flow. And so sometimes tough love may have to come into play. Like Neptune and Aries can be tough love, but ultimately it can break the cycle of addiction and be helpful to people. So some of that's what I'm looking at. Also with the Jupiter and Cancer, I think that there might be a sense of somewhat more renewed pride in our country again, because we are a Cancer nation in the United States, which has felt very elusive, I think, as we've become so divided. So there might be a sense of being on the same page for the first time in a while. So those are some of the themes that I'm looking at because of the cardinal energy, where they're going to be, the Saturn and the Jupiter are going to be squaring each other. So they're going to have conflict. So there's going to be a little bit of push and pull, but a square often results in giant leaps forward.
And when Jupiter's involved in the square, it can just magnify or amplify whatever the underlying issue is. It's not the cosmic 2x4 coming between your eyes necessarily, although with Saturn, it might be. I don't know.
Right. I mean, it might be like empowering that sheriff. And so, yeah, there's a lot of different ways things can play out. And that's why I tend to not be super predictive rather than say these are the energies. So,
Right.
I can make bold declarations based on what I think. But when I've done that in the past, I've been right and I've been wrong. So,
Yep. Same here.
yeah. So yeah, those are the things that I'm looking at. I do think the Uranus and Gemini is a little bit of a wild card, because both Gemini and Uranus are wild cards.
Right.
They're both incredibly unpredictable. There has been an energy of war that has surrounded that in the United States that a lot of astrologers are talking about. And so rather than predicting war, I would say that we are going to be in a time where choices are going to be made. And we have to decide what's worth fighting for, what we truly care about, what are our values. I think we're at decision time. We're at decision points. That's what I would say.
I would agree completely, and I would just throw in, we've been in a war, and it's been a communication war. It's been a technology war. So that may be what we get a hold on. But at any rate, thank you so much for taking the time and for talking so much. I didn't mean that to sound the way it did, for sharing so much about what you've learned and how you approach astrology and what you see happening. Can you tell people where they can find you, all the various places?
Yeah. So first and foremost, you can find me on my YouTube channel, which is Lawless Astrology Channel. So Lawless, Lawless, Lawless Astrology. And then you can go to lawlessastrology.com. And I have a free beginner workbook that you can download there. So those are the two places. I'm not on a lot of social media at this point anymore.
Well, thank you very much. People do follow her. She's very, very clear and very interesting. And as always, my forecasts are the monthly and the moon forecasts are at Om Times, and the monthly, moon, and weekly forecasts are at my site, empowermentunlimited.net, and also my YouTube channel, which is Professional Aquarian. And I have a Patreon, patreon.com/Kathy Beal, where, among other things, I have really snappy, very short, under 1 minute forecasts for every day. And they're sassy is a polite word for them. So thank you again so much, Dabney. I'm so glad that you had the time.
Thank you so much.
All right. Happy June, everybody.